So I'm here from the great state of Texas. I appreciate y'all having me and giving me this opportunity to speak with y'all. My role in the Constitution Party is I am the Veterans Liaison for the state of Texas, the Social Media Director for the state of Texas, and the Dallas County Coordinator. So that's what I do. I'm relatively new to the party. I am not one of the ancients. I found out about the party through Darrell Castle and his campaign for president. I was one of those people that was looking at the options and just wringing my hands saying I can't vote for these people. And when I came across Darrell Castle, I've never voted for anyone with a clearer conscience. So I'm glad I did, and I'm glad to be here in the Constitution Party. A little bit about me. I am 36 years old. At the time of 9/11, I had just gone into college and dropped out, joined the Army, did 8 years in the Army. 2 deployments, came back, saw the way we were fighting the war on terror, decided I didn't agree necessarily with that, got out of the Army, went back to school and got my degree in philosophy. My background in the Army was fixing medical equipment. I worked in the combat support hospitals. And so now I'm a technology consultant for an architecture firm that builds mostly hospitals, but all sorts of things. So that's sort of a little bit about me. Now that I'm here in the party, I'm really excited to help. I know there's been a lot of things that have been tried in the past, but it seems to me that a lot of things can be improved with modern technology, and that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about here today, is just how we can communicate that message more clearly and hopefully overcome some of our limitations. We talked a little bit about, Doug spoke about CPAC, and one of the key things about CPAC, as Doug mentioned, was they had gone to the I Side With website and taken this survey, and they had come up in almost full agreement with either Darrell Castle or the Constitution Party platform itself. And so a lot of people were familiar with us, which kind of shocked us. We didn't know we had that sort of exposure. So we're glad we did. We're glad they were aware of us, and so that makes our job easier, knowing that the younger audience is already aware of us to some degree. So we did get on some media outlets, and I think that's a really worthwhile thing to note. We were, as Doug mentioned, we got a brief show on Politico. There was a couple other media outlets that wrote articles about us and our platform, some of them flattering, some of them not so much. We were on a couple of podcasts. I was interested to see that a lot of the people running the podcasts and at CPAC, some of them were in middle school, and we were blown away by how much these kids knew about the Constitution and about the principles behind the Constitution. So we were really impressed by that, and it's really encouraging to know that there is a future out there and that the younger generations are embracing this message. So that's something we need to be aware of, is that there is light at the end of the tunnel. I know it can get frustrating out there working in the booths or, operating online, sharing, messaging, all of that. It can get tedious, and so knowing that it is being effective, I think, is helpful for us to be able to communicate that message more positively to the public. We always want to maintain a positive outlook and communicate that to the people that we're talking with. One of the key things we want to focus on, I think, when communicating our message is consistency. We need to be consistent in our message. That's one of the biggest compliments we got at CPAC in the booth, was they were impressed by the consistency of our policy prescriptions. So things they wouldn't have expected from us, because of our mostly conservative membership, we're consistent with the Constitution, and so we had the policy that while it may conflict with our conservative values that many of us hold, we recognize that the Constitution is a document that protects everyone, regardless of their values. And so they were really impressed by our consistency. Something we want to really make sure to go back to and to focus on as far as consistency goes is the 3 pillars. So I created this pamphlet for our for the CPAC. Actually, I created it for Texas, and then we modified it for a national version at CPAC. And I've got a template of this. Anybody who's interested, come see me. We've got copies in the back, and I've got a template that I can send to you that you can customize by putting your own state party here, putting your own state party's website, and all the other information is generic. So what this is a specific trifold pamphlet that focuses on the 3 pillars, and that really needs to be our focus of our message. So this pamphlet is designed to have a little bit of information for people who are completely unfamiliar with our party. The first thing we want to bring them to is the 3 pillars. Any topic they bring up, just about, can be covered by at least one of these 3 pillars. So bringing the issue back to the 3 pillars and being able to talk intelligently about how particular issues reference the three pillars is key to our message consistency. We always want to bring it back to that. We want to have that brand recognition of consistent messaging and the three pillars. That's the tip of our spear for our messaging is the three pillars. So we need to constantly revert back to that. Staying on topic is really important in this. It's easy to get drawn into, whether you're at a booth, talking with a friend, a coworker, somebody on the street, or online. It's easy to chase down rabbit holes and go to these points to where eventually you're talking about nitty-gritty details and you're missing the broader picture of the principles or of the pillars. And so we need to constantly revert back, try to bring the discussion back to the three pillars, bring it back to those principles, to those key issues. Try to stay on topic because it's easy to get off and kind of lose your way down the rabbit hole of discussions. One of the things that I really found we got asked a lot, and I'm sure many of you have been asked this, whether you're working gun shows or just talking with somebody who's unfamiliar with the party. How are you different from the Republican Party? We got this all the time, especially at CPAC, because most people there are Republicans, and they look at our platform, they look at the Republican platform, they're like, what's the difference? You guys just seem like little Republicans. And so one of the key answers that I typically gave when asked that questions, and there are multiple answers, but bringing it back to the pillars, I brought it to integrity. And I said, you can go to the Republican platform and you read it and it sounds pretty good. And they'll say, I'm going to not fund Planned Parenthood. I'm not going to give way on amnesty. And they'll make all these campaign promises. And you ask the candidate in the Republican Party or the Libertarian Party for that matter, or any other party, do you have integrity? Of course, they're going to say yes. You ask the party, does your party have integrity? Of course, they're going to say yes, right? And we're no different in that regard. We say we have integrity. But we're the only party that has a mechanism in place by which we can maintain the integrity of our party and the integrity of our candidates. And that's the contract that we require from our candidates. That really separates us from the Republican Party, the Libertarian Party, the Democrat Party, or any other party. Because our contracts require that the campaign promises that are made are kept. So they can't make outlandish campaign promises that they can't keep, and the promises they make, they have to keep, or there are consequences. So that's one way of saying, look, this is a matter of integrity, and this is how integrity in the Constitution Party and with Constitution Party candidates is different from the Republican Party and Republican Party candidates. And so that's just one example of how you can bring back the discussion of something that seems like a broad question back to the three pillars and talk about something unique within the Constitution Party and how we're different. You can do this with all sorts of topics, but that's just one example. Another topic that we should be focused on for consistency is a style guide. For those of you who aren't familiar with what a style guide is, it is essentially a booklet that outlines the color schemes, the logos, the typeface, the anything you can think of that might be used in publications. Now, as you go online and as you go to websites and Facebook pages, you'll notice, or even ask a few people for their business cards here today, you'll notice there's a very diverse design between the states, and that's an outgrowth of the nature of our party. But what's important for us as a party is consistency. We're looking for brand recognition. We want, when people see this logo, they don't even have to see the words that correspond with it, and they know that's the Constitution Party. If you see one design of an eagle at one state and another design of an eagle at another state, it can be confusing for those who aren't familiar. If we were larger, you can have different rhinos. Elephants. But for us getting started, we need to make sure that we're able to have that brand recognition. So we need to have consistency. I believe that a style guide that we use across the entire nation would enable us to do that. There are limitations to this style guide because of the nature and history of our party. Some parties in some states aren't called the Constitution Party. And I've learned over the few years I've been here that there's good reason for that. So we can make exceptions for that, saying if your state doesn't have the Constitution Party, then this is the approved format for how your materials will be produced. I know a lot of people want to do things from the bottom up, but some things especially when we're trying to have consistency across states, we ought to do it for the good of the party itself. So that is something that I think we could really benefit from is a style guide. Another thing when we're talking about consistency is sticking to the Constitution. A lot of what we talk about we'll get off topic. We'll start talking about our religious beliefs. We'll start talking about our moral beliefs. And while probably 95%, if not more than that, of people agree with us in this room, especially the people we're talking to, many of them agree with us. What we've found is that there's a lot of people that even though they agree with the moral or religious aspects of what you're stating, it concerns them to tie that to the Constitution. And while many of us understand the religious and biblical underpinnings of the founding documents, it's important in our messaging to give a message that is palatable to all people because the Constitution is for all Americans. We need to make that clear. So sticking to the Constitution when you're talking about things is really important. What is your policy prescription based on the Constitution? That's what people want to know. Another thing that we need to be concerned with, something that would help us with our messaging, is adaptability. Now, while we need to be consistent and rigid in our consistency, we also need to have an adaptable message because it's not always the same audience. I'm reminded of what the Apostle Paul said to the Corinthians, "I am made all things to all men, that I might by all means save some." It's important for us to understand that not everybody has our same religious worldview. It's important for us to recognize that not everybody has our same moral views. It's important for us to recognize that those people might still support the Constitution. And that's really what we're here to do. It's not just about conservatives, and it's not just about Republicans. I hear a lot that we are constitutional conservatives. I don't know exactly what we're conserving anymore, but the word conservative to a lot of Constitution-supporting people is an automatic block. They hear the word conservative, they shut down. We want to make sure that that person is open to receiving the message. We want to make sure that it's fertile ground for spreading the seed and the message of the Constitution Party. And we need to avoid language which is going to automatically shut that person down due to whatever preconceived notions they have, whether they be true or false. We need to make ourselves all things to all men. So we need to remember that there are libertarians and there are even Democrats who believe in the Constitution and believe in what it says, and their party has left them as much as the Republican Party has left Republicans. There's a lot of classical liberals out there in the Libertarian Party and in the Democrat Party who believe in the freedom of speech, who believe in your right to bear arms, and don't agree with where the Democrat Party has gone. We need to make sure to reach out to all of those people and not just stick to the Republicans. This is really important because we don't want to become the DNC's MVP. We recruit half the Republicans, guess what happens? The Democrats win all the elections. So we need to be cognizant of this, that what we're doing is we're trying to change the hearts and minds of the American people, not just the Republican Party. We need to have a multifaceted message in order to accomplish this. So while we're rigid in our principles and we're rigid in sticking to what the Constitution says, the Constitution is a broad document that covers a lot of issues. And what I mean when I say multifaceted is you can present a face of the party platform to one person and another face of the party platform to another, both being true, but you know that this face is more, the person on the left will be more receptive to this face, and the person on the right will be more receptive to that face. So to give you some examples, the war on drugs. Our party platform says that we want to end the war on drugs. And for good reason. It's unconstitutional. You can say that to someone on the left, and that will resonate with them. They will find that very appealing. You can also tell them that we want to, that the government shouldn't be regulating, defining, or licensing marriage. For good reason. They don't regulate, define, and license baptisms. Why would they do any other religious ceremony? People on the left will find that very appealing because it allows them the freedom to do the things that they want to do. Whether we agree with that choice morally or not, is politically irrelevant. and we should leave that condemnation out of it. Now, if they're our Christian brother or sister and we want to impart some wisdom to them, separate and apart from that, that's fine, and by all means, please do so. But when talking to people and trying to engage the public about these issues, it's best to stick to our policy prescriptions and to leave out any sort of condemnation. We believe some choices are immoral, but we also believe you should have the freedom to make those immoral choices. So, those are two examples that you can present to people on the left in a multifaceted presentation. To people on the right, it's much easier. We could talk about the Second Amendment. We could talk about the First Amendment with things that we're more familiar with and we're more comfortable talking about because we don't feel that same moral difference between the people we may be speaking with. But we need to recognize that all of these people fall under the umbrella of the protection of the Constitution, and that's what our platform advocates for. And so we need to make that apparent to the people, and having this platform and this presentation that is receptive to everybody. When talking with people, either online or in a booth at a gun show or wherever you may be, it's important to start with common ground. I know a lot of us are really tempted these days to argue with people or to debate with people and to find those issues on which we don't agree and try to convince the other person of why they're wrong. I'm guilty of it myself. I love to argue, and anyone who knows me will tell you about that. But when trying to convince people to come over to the party, it's important to start on common ground. You have to find something that you can agree upon. Sometimes that can be difficult, but sometimes it's easier than you think if you start in the right place. Someone may agree with everything the Constitution Party has to say, except when it comes to the Convention of States. So you don't want to engage that person for the first time on the Convention of States. You want to talk about all of the other issues that we agree on. And this one issue that you may or may not agree with the Constitution Party on, we don't start there. We end there. And after they're convinced that, hey, I agree with this party on everything else, then most rational people will say, well, I can work from within to try to change that, or I can compromise on that, or whatever their position may be. So try to find that common ground to start with. Talking about finding that common ground and back to our multifaceted message, I was working a booth at a gun show a while back, and I was speaking with this lady and telling her about the party platform and the Second Amendment, and she was like, oh, this is great, this is awesome. I really love what you're talking about. I wish my daughter was into this. I said, well, is she around? Yeah, she's here, but she goes to an art school and she's very libertarian and she's not going to be into this. So we'll bring her by and we'll talk about it. And I did exactly what I described to you a moment ago. I presented her with the facets of the Constitution that protect the liberties that I assumed she was concerned with, and she was very receptive to it. Her mother was excited to see that they were both interested in the same political party when her mother had assumed there's no way they could agree on anything politically. But when it's as broad as the Constitution, we find most people on the left and right can agree on a lot of things. So it's important to be able to not argue, find that common ground, and to give the message to the people that it's intended for in the format that will be most effective. This is how we got a Constitution. Our founding fathers didn't all agree. They got together and they found the most things they could have common ground on. They started with first principles and they moved up from there. And so coming from that Enlightenment mentality of coming to first principles first and building upon that as a firm foundation was what enabled us to have a document so great as the Constitution, because it protects everyone. That's what's key about this message, is that it's for everyone, not just Republicans, not just conservatives, not just Constitution Party members. So we have to keep that in mind when we're communicating our message to the public. As I said, the First Amendment is an easy one to find common ground with. We find a lot of people on the left and right both agree on the First Amendment. I know there's small factions out there now who are changing their mind on that, but I assure you, they're very small. They're very vocal, but they're very small. And so talking about First Amendment is something a lot of people are concerned with now. And so starting there is also a great place. Anti-interventionalism. You'd be surprised how many people on both sides of the aisle are not interested in being involved in these wars overseas. I find that as a combat veteran myself, it's easy to articulate that point for me, and I find that people are often very receptive to it, talking about how our responsibility is to defend the Constitution and not to be involved in policing the world. So that's a very positive message that it's easy to find common ground with people from both sides of the aisle on. And again, that's key to actually recruiting people and changing people's hearts and minds. A lot of the ways we've talked about here have been a mix of working booths and updating our websites and having our social media presence. Both of these are important. It's important for us when we're coming up with our strategies of how to have these discussions, that we look at our party limitations and we say, okay, what is it that we're doing? How do we articulate this message in the most effective manner possible? And we've talked about a few tactics for doing that, but I think the strategy needs to focus on technology. And while it's great to work booths, and it's great to go to events, and it's great to go to gun shows, and all of that, and I've done all those things, really the best avenue for a party with our limitations is the technological avenue. Our limitations are funding, volunteers, and exposure. So we don't have a whole lot of money in comparison to the other parties. We don't have a lot of volunteers in comparison to the other parties. When we do have money and volunteers to go to events, we get a lot of interviews. Turns out most of those interviews don't make it to actually being published. So we have a problem getting exposure even when we can get in front of the camera. So these are our limitations. It's important for us to recognize those, because if we don't recognize our own limitations, then we can't adapt for those. And we have to adapt. We have to improvise, and we have to overcome. It's important for our party. So, we talked a little bit about the online meetings that were proposed here, and it's been decided that we're going to try to practice that at a state level. And being from Texas, we're actually planning on running our next executive committee meeting on the online site. So we're going to be using the program. We're going to be the beta site for the National Party, and we want to test this out because we believe that technology is going to enable us to save money in running these things, at the same time getting us more exposure. So while we understand the position the National Party has taken, and I think it's a great position, we also recognize that moving forward we need to come up with a strategy to implement technology like this. And Texas, being the beta site, it enables the National Party to see how it works, work out the kinks, and do that. We should all be experimenting with technology at the state level as best we can to enable us to overcome these costs and get more exposure. Another thing, I talked about this pamphlet, printed materials. One of the key things here is, again, the logo, right? We need to have that style guide, and we need to use it for not only printed materials, but online materials as well. So it's important that we have a consistent style that we're all going back to. Again, I've got these, and I've got templates that we can talk about and I can hand out. Also, our business cards. I don't know how well y'all can see this, but the idea is that the logo, the style, the color scheme, it's the same. I've got a bunch of these if you'd like to see them as well. And both of these were printed from Vistaprint. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Vistaprint.com. It's very cheap, very prompt, and quality materials. So, you might be able to print them at home for a little bit cheaper, and if that's all you can do, then by all means do that, right? But if you've got the money, printing on quality paper with quality printers makes a big difference. We're a small party. A lot of times, getting materials from us is the first exposure people have to the party, and so we want to make sure we put our best foot forward. And we want to make sure that we put our best foot forward when presenting our materials to the public. It's very important. And so if you're printing these things at home, sometimes, you only get them in black and white. They're on regular printer paper, and I've handed out a lot of pamphlets like that, and that's fine. But if your state party can afford it, or if the National Party is doing something and can afford it, then please spend the extra money to get quality materials printed. It makes a difference. Social media is key to our exposure. I'm sure most of you are on Facebook, or were at one point. I'm sure many of you are on Twitter. and several other social media accounts, it's important that we use these because they're cheap. They're essentially free. And so for a party with limited funds, it's important that we leverage those free applications as much as we can to get as much exposure. We can reach hundreds of thousands of people with a single post if we do it properly. A lot of times that can be difficult to do, but with proper guidance and with proper strategy, I believe our online presence can be improved. It helps us to overcome those limitations. One of the things I see online, and one of the ways I believe that we could improve on that, is there's a lot of pages and a lot of groups on Facebook. You go on Facebook and you go to the search bar, you've never heard of the Constitution Party, and you type in Constitution Party, you get a bazillion pages and groups. You get groups for communities, you get groups for cities and counties, and you get groups for states, and you get groups for official and unofficial, and there's just a lot of pages, and that can cause confusion for somebody. So having a formatted, structured, official organizational structure for Facebook and for any other online media that's organized similarly is important. We want to streamline that. Now, there's nothing wrong with having a state page or even a county page in some states. It doesn't work in Texas. We have hundreds of counties. But for many states, it does, and that's fine. But we ought to have an organizational structure for how we're disseminating that information online and what pages are actually official pages of the Constitution Party. It can be confusing. And again, that brand logo, we want to make sure that we have that consistency of imaging that's going out online. So it's important. I mentioned a single post can bring about hundreds of thousands of viewers, right? We've seen a substantial change in the way that our Facebook page has been operating. And one of the things that has changed is a lot of the administrators, myself included. For those of you who don't know, my nickname on Facebook is Old Sarge. So many of you may have interacted with me not knowing that was my name. I got that nickname in the Corps Cadets at Texas A&M and changed my Facebook page, and it's just kind of stayed there, and the anonymity has served me well in some cases. But for those of you who've interacted with me, you know that you may know I'm also an administrator on the page, and one of the changes we've made on the page is many of the administrators have been sharing memes. For those of you who aren't familiar with memes, they're not mimes or mimes. We've heard it pronounced a lot of ways, but for those of you who aren't aware, a meme is essentially a piece of, it's either a photo or a short video clip, which will have words displayed on it. You've probably seen these online. They're not so different from a political cartoon. They're very similar. And they'll usually display a message or make a joke. Usually these are very popular images from movies or from some sort of social context that it's become very viral already. And you're just applying your own message to it. So we've been sharing these memes on Facebook, and we've noticed that the memes, by far, are shared and viewed and liked and commented on more than anything else. A lot more. Some of our regular posts typically get around 2,000 to 4,000 people reached. A good meme can get 250, 300,000 people reached. So we're talking about a substantial difference given the tactics we're using. Now, one of the concerns we have mutually expressed within the people on the administration team that have been talking about this, just one-off on our own, talking about how we're going to be doing this, something I keep hearing from several administrators is that we want to share it as the Constitution Party. Myself and others have created a public page that we share things from. The reason we've done that is we don't want... One of the key aspects of how memes are used is they're stolen. This is how it happens. You just save the image and share it as your own image rather than sharing the post itself. And this is fine, and this is the way it's typically done. However, we didn't think it was appropriate for the Constitution Party's official page to be stealing memes and using them as their own, whether they come from Turning Point USA or the John Birch Society or any other organization that might have a particular meme on a particular issue that we agree with what that message is. We didn't think it was appropriate to steal it and share it as the official Constitution Party page. What we think is appropriate is getting skilled individuals, because memeing is an art form. I'm not good at it. You have to be able to articulate the message in a funny way that's relatable to an image that corresponds with it. I've done it. I have people who I work with who are much better at it, and so I defer to them because it is an art form. So if we can find those people within the party who are skilled at that, and we have some of them, and create a team that was able to make original content memes, putting a watermark of the Constitution Party logo and the website embedded into the image in a place where it's not easy to crop out or cut out, then if somebody steals our meme and copies the picture and shares it, our logo and branding goes with it. So this is something we should really focus on because this is a cheap way, using nothing but volunteers, doesn't cost us anything. We can improve our messaging and our branding that goes out to everyone. Yes, sir.
Do you have to have a TM at the bottom of that logo?
I'm not sure if our logo is trademarked. I'm not sure, and I don't know if we would need to do that. I'd leave that to the legal experts. I'm not sure about that. So, okay. I'm not sure. That's a legal question. I just don't know the answer to it.
One person brought that up to me, saying, yeah, hey, you should have that on there.
Yeah, well,
It's stolen.
right, and so we would have to file for a trademark patent, and I don't know if we've done that. I'm sure it's very expensive. But regardless of whether we have the trademark or not, we should. Okay. So it originated with the Alabama Party, for those of you who may not have heard that. So we need to check with them if we're going to trademark it. I'm not sure about the answer to that question, but regardless, this is our logo for now, and we should embed it into the memes that we're sharing, so that if they are stolen, we're able to still get the credit for it. I see a lot of people in the Constitution Party sharing things from the Libertarian Party because it has that logo or that libertarianparty.com embedded into the meme that they're sharing, and the meme is good, and you may not have even seen it because it's a watermark buried somewhere in the image, and that's the appropriate way to do it because it makes it difficult to erase. So that's something we should look at because, again, given our party's limitations of funds, that's something that we can do with just a few volunteers, and I would suggest an approval board because memes are meant to be comedic, and with comedy there's always controversy, and you want to push that envelope, but you want to make sure not to push it too far when these are coming as official from the party. So it's important, I think, that we would have some sort of approval process for this. And these are all suggestions that would need to be implemented by a communications director or by the executive committee, some sort of approval. But these are just things that I'm suggesting and that you can think about doing for your state party, if nothing else. Censorship is still an issue. I've been banned a dozen times on Facebook and on Twitter, and it's not for saying anything vulgar or threatening anyone. It's because they don't like the messaging, or oftentimes they just think I'm a bot because I'm sharing so much. So we need to be careful about those things. We need to know the environment we're in and the limitations of that environment. Facebook's a great tool, but it's a biased tool. So we need to be aware of that. We've heard a lot of suggestions about MeWe, and last night we heard about Gab. I think these are great things to explore. Any social media site we can be using to leverage a free platform, we need to investigate. And so all of these things should be something we're looking into. YouTube is another great social media platform that I don't think we leverage to the full capabilities of that platform. We've got this great audio video equipment. We've got videographers sitting here helping us with this. Creating, for your candidates that are running even, creating short 3-minute videos on one topic. Pick a topic and talk about that one topic for 3 minutes. What is the topic? What's the problem? What's my solution? That's internet gold. A lot of our videos coming from the Constitution Party are 45 minutes. My friends and family tell me all the time, I don't even click on videos you send me anymore because they're all 45 minutes long, and I'm not going to sit there and watch all that. You send them a 3-minute video, they might watch it. So that's right. Yeah, that's another aspect of memes that's really popular and why it reaches hundreds of thousands of people, because it's quick. So getting that message out there in a short and easy to digest format is important. We have very short attention spans these days. We want everything, all the information right now, and we don't even want to sit through a 15-minute video and learn about what the issue is. All they want to know is, what's the issue? Why should I care? And how are you going to solve the problem? And if you can get that into a 3-minute high-quality video and high-quality audio. That's another problem I see with our YouTube videos, is very often they're made in crowded rooms at events like this where we're interviewing somebody, and the audio-video people are doing the best they can with the atmosphere they have. But we need high-quality HD video. Your iPhone has a 4K camera on it. Everybody has a 4K camera, or at least a 1080p camera in your pocket. And so it's easy to be able to record these things. Audio is a little more difficult. The audio on your phone isn't very good, but you plug in those headphones that come with your iPhone, that's not too bad. And so there's easy, cheap solutions to do these things. And we need to have an environment where it's quiet. You're concerned about what the background is. Consider your lighting. Consider your everything in the environment of the shot, and try to make these videos as short and high quality as you can, because again, if there's background noise, anything like that, producing these materials, it's going to distract from the message. So having that message be clear, concise, and high quality is important. And that's not so different from the advice that I'm giving with the pamphlets as well. Again, clear, concise, and not a lot of information. You don't want to overwhelm the person. A lot of what we try to do is put the whole message in one message. That's not the best way to win hearts and minds. You need to get their attention and just plant the seed at first. So it's important we have those. There's nothing wrong with recording an entire speech. Sometimes people are interested in that. They want to delve deeper, and that's important too. But again, I'd encourage you to try to do it with as high quality audio video as possible, because it makes a difference on whether people watch it all the way through or not. One of the key things that you can do, again, going back to our limitations and how we can overcome them on social media, like the posts. Constitution Party posts a lot of things out there. They don't get a lot of likes. If everybody in this room and everybody in the party has all these likes, then giving those likes to the post makes it to where the algorithms will move the post higher up in the newsfeed. So you need to like. More than liking, comment. Comments definitely drive the algorithms. So even if your comment is just a little emoji thumbs up, that's great. That counts as a comment. Share it. What we find is that for every 100 shares, there's about 5,000 people reached. So share the post. That's the most important thing you could do. The second most is comment. And the third most is like it. So for every post out there, just say, great, awesome, this, whatever. Though each one of those comments drives the algorithms to make that post show up in people's news feeds sooner. So liking, commenting, and sharing. And at the end of the day, social media and technology is great, but we need to get the message out there, and we need to there's no replacing the boots on the ground. You have to go out there. You have to work the gun shows. You have to work the convention centers and press the flesh. There's no replacing this. And so, work those gun shows, work those 4-H events, whatever may be, the state fair, whatever's going on. Get a booth. Go out there and shake those hands. And I know many of y'all have been doing this long before I ever came around, and I'm preaching to the choir here. But it's important to know that you can't replace human interaction. So we need to be able to do that and implement these strategies there. Another thing that's been talked about for a while is the Constitution Revolution. And this is something that Gary Welsh and others have been, from the County by County Committee, have been talking about trying to organize, which is a non-affiliate organization. Going to these non-Constitution Party meetings, or starting these constitutionalist organizations that aren't affiliated with the Constitution Party, bring in people who may be constitutionalists, but in the back of their head, for whatever reason, they're not interested right now in joining a third party. This is a great way to plant that seed. Go to those other organizations if they exist already in your community, and if they don't, start one, because you may get Republicans and Libertarians to come to something that is constitutionalist and not Constitution Party, and be able to slowly bring them into the fold. And so being able to do that and again, make that messaging palatable to your audience is really important. And again, if there's one thing I can leave you with that you can do and you can encourage the people in your state to do that will have the most impact technologically in how we're giving our message, it's that like, comment, and share. It's really easy to do. It doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't take much time, and it makes a big difference in the algorithm. So please keep that in mind and communicate that to your people. I want to leave it open for any questions if anyone's got any. Please come to the microphone.
That brochure you've got in your hand,
Yeah.
you got a PDF of that you can share?
Absolutely, I do. And so I have a PDF. I designed this in Microsoft Word, and so I can send you the original Word document so that you can adapt the state and the website yourself. I would recommend just sticking with the same formatting and just changing the state and the website, and that's the only information that is state specific. But absolutely, I'll give you a card and
Thanks.
I can get that to you.
I guess I'm not doing. We purchased a high quality printer, and we're able to produce that at our office in Lancaster now.
That's amazing. Yeah, and so the only thing I would encourage us to do is the high quality paper.
We can choose
Excellent.
the paper. Yes.
Excellent. And so, if we have that ability in-house, that's great, and we should always use the cheapest method possible. Again, these are all from Vistaprint. I find them easy and cheap, but if we've got a cheaper method that produces the same quality pamphlets, that's even better.
Dan Cummings, Wyoming, brief commentary. Point well taken that you said about the weakness of constitutional conservatives. Since we're not trying to conserve the present system, we could think about other terms such as constitutional restorationists or constitutional revivalists as starters.
Yeah, there's lots of terminology we can use. It's important, that's a great point, and it's a broader point that I think is worth expounding upon. Our language right now in the country is under attack, and we need to be cognizant of this and be willing to engage on that battlefield. I find that omitting qualifiers when possible is best, and so just saying constitutionalist, I think, is the best. I know many prefer the term constitutionist, and that's fine as well. But that single term, I think, identifies what our party's about, and it doesn't lend the qualification, which opens the door for more confusion. The more qualified a term is, the more confusing and muddled the term becomes, oftentimes. So we need to be aware of this. And on a broader point, we need to focus on making sure we use our language properly and use the terminology. I'll give you an example of how this is done. Very often we'll talk about gay marriage. Well, it's not gay marriage, it's homosexual marriage, and we've gotten into the habit of using slang because the culture has tried to change the language and pervert the language to fit their agenda. We need to be careful not to talk about things that way. We don't want to talk about welfare reform because they want to justify it under the welfare clause. And so we need to use the proper terminology and say government handouts. So we need to use the proper terms. Another one that I run into a lot of people with is calling abortion by what it actually is. So we typically say we're pro-life and they're pro-choice. But the truth of the matter is that we're not pro-life and they're not pro-choice. We're not pro-life because that term was coined in order to identify that we believe that life begins at conception. It was us affirming before we knew whether or not it was a life at conception. There's no question anymore. It's scientific fact. It's conclusive. Microbiology and embryology is clear. Life begins at conception. So we need to change our terms. The terms now should be our terms should be prenatal rights activism, and the opposition's term is no longer pro-choice, it's postnatal supremacy. And putting it in its proper terminology, and I use that terminology because the argument is called the personhood argument, which has been used historically by the Nazis to argue for Aryan supremacy and by slave owners to argue for white supremacy. It's exactly logically and structurally the same argument. It's called the personhood argument. You can look it up. And right now it's being applied to prenatal human beings, and so it is postnatal supremacy. So using terminology clearly, concisely, and accurately is important to us.